Is this thing on?
Yesterday's price is not today's price.
Hey, you know who went public this year? Rubrik. And we brought on an expert, my buddy Samarth Mital, the Senior Director of Sales Operations and Business Intelligence and Analytics, comes on the show to talk all things pipeline, territory creation, commission plans, and renewals. This is a tactical one that you're not going to want to miss if you're having to do quota design, if you're having to run calls with your CRO each week, and if you're having to talk to a rep that says, hey dude, my commission is too high. He also does some amazing public math where he breaks down a rep's job into hours of the day, how many accounts, how many meetings, how many days in the month to actually sell. He makes it real for us. And you know, as a company gets bigger, Rubrik is now north of $1 billion in ARR. Renewals become increasingly important and complex. So what does a healthy renewals function look like? All this and much, much more after a short word from our sponsors. What does the future hold for business? Ask 9 experts and you'll get 10 answers. Bull market, bear market. Rates will rise, rates will fall. Can someone please just invent a crystal ball already? Until then, over 40,000 businesses have future-proofed their companies with NetSuite by Oracle, the #1 cloud ERP, bringing accounting, financial management, inventory, HR into one fluid platform. With one unified business management suite, there's one source of truth, giving you the visibility and control you need to make quick decisions. With real-time insights and forecasting, you're peering into the future with actionable data. Whether you're closing the books in days, not weeks, you're spending less time looking backwards and more time on what's next. If you listen to this podcast, you'll know I ask CFOs all the time to rep their tech stacks, and I would say almost every one of them use NetSuite. And that's what I would use too. Whether you're a company earning millions or even hundreds of millions, NetSuite helps you respond to immediate challenges and seize your biggest opportunities. Speaking of opportunity, download the CFO's Guide to AI and Machine Learning at netsuite.com/metrics. The guide is free to you. That is netsuite.com/metrics. Ooh, yeah, it's netsuite.com/metrics. Please, guys, I really need this. Being an operator is not for the faint of heart. It often feels like you're jumping out of an airplane and building the parachute on your way down. CEOs, CFOs, COOs, and BizOps leaders feel my pain. That's why I joined Operators Guild. It's home to more than 1,000 of the most elite, high-growth operators in the world. Think the Special Forces for business scale. Members have access to over 150 in-person events across all 25 global chapters. The modern startup founder, CFO, and COO are really just multidisciplinary problem solvers, which is why having the best problem solvers together has created the ultimate diversity intelligence of any operator group in the world. Operators Guild gave me the chance to meet my own personal board of directors, people I can bounce ideas off of, and their online forum allows you to get answers from your peers as questions pop up. Like, how do I run an employee secondary? Or what should I pay as a base commission rate on SaaS deals? I've made great friends through attending their highly acclaimed OG Summit and frequently attend their online masterclasses taught by the best tech operators in the business. Join Operators Guild and access the Navy SEALs of high-growth business scale, a group built by operators for operators. Learn more and apply at operators-guild.com. That's operators-guild.com, and tell them CJ sent you. They'll hook you up. Samarth, welcome to the podcast.
Excited to be here. Thanks for the opportunity, CJ.
We had the chance to meet in person in real life at a happy hour we did in San Francisco. So it's cool to bring it full circle and now be able to jam out with you here.
Excited, and I'm a big fan of your newsletter and all the great stuff that you publish. So keep it going.
I remember I'd written the S1 breakdown on Rubrik, and I was like, "Did I get everything right?" And you looked at me like, "Hey, you got some of it right." So I'm glad you read it at least.
No, it's great. It's great. Keep it coming.
I want to start by talking about the teams under your purview, because I want to give listeners the context onto why I think you're such an awesome person to talk about sales planning, about pipeline, and about territory design. So what groups are rolling up to you today functionally?
Yeah, absolutely. So hi, everyone. I'm Samarth Mital. I'm in Rubrik currently. I've been here for about 4.5 years. Prior to that, I was in management consulting for 10 years. So a decade, but think of it as served 30, 35 different companies. Yeah. So it's a heck of a lot of a roller coaster ride from that sense. So at Rubrik, I have sales planning and analytics and pipeline. So those are the kind of broad framing of it. Also, I do handle the mid-market and the SDR operations. So what's fascinating is that, as getting a ringside view of a company that's growing so rapidly. So when I joined, just for some context, we were at 70 million in recurring revenue. So relatively small, given where we are and where we intend to go. We're nearing $1 billion as we speak. So, and that's happened in the last 4.5 years. So pretty amazing to be able to be in a place where you can architect the plan, work with the finance teams, work with your sales teams and various other cross-functional business teams, and build that plan, and then start to figure out ways in which you can put your sales reps in a position of success so they can crush their quota. So that's in a nutshell my role here.
A lot of software has been sold in your plans. That's pretty amazing. Like I would want to print those operating plans out, those quota deployments out, and hang them on my fridge if I were you.
Definitely, a lot of $1 million W-2s out there.
Yeah. So tactically speaking, what are the recurring meetings you have on your calendar for forecasting? Because that's the name of the game, right? So, like, in other words, what's the cadence that you get comfortable with the business's velocity?
Yeah, absolutely. Great question. And I think, it's one thing to set the plan and get people comfortable, but it's a whole other thing to execute against it. And where you earn your dollars, where you earn your stripes is in that execution. And it starts with having very deliberate and thoughtful cadences, meetings, and really thinking about what discussions need to happen in those meetings, right? So with that framing, we meet I'll share the end result and then backtrack, right? We meet our C-suite every Friday, okay? Prior to that, the Monday is when the CRO reviews his forecast with his directs, right? So the GVP of Americas, of EMEA, of APAC, they come together in separate calls. And in those calls, you'll have also other cross-functional leaders, deal desk, finance, etc., also being part of that. And we'll review what's the top line, what's the forecast, break it down by AVP, by leaders within each of those, and get a sense for what's the deal level, what's the opportunity level roll up. Start to look at what are we forecasting for the month, for the quarter, and then look at areas where we see softness, right? Whether we're talking deal stages, we're talking deals that are out of path, progression of deals. And then we start to get into by segment. We look at certain tranche of deals that need help, right? And that's where the real focus is, to make sure that we can move the needle forward, because it just doesn't, we don't want it to be an exercise of just deal reviews, but it's also, where can we move the needle? What conversations need to be had? How do we broker the right inroads into those accounts? And that's where the fun really is, right? That's where you're starting to see the real experience come to the forefront. So that's the Monday call. Prior to that, the GVPs of each of those theaters, they go in and have their conversations with their AVPs, RVPs, etc. So, you kind of backtrack. The real cadence at the AE/RD level is starting on the Wednesday. So Wednesday, Thursday, they do it. GVPs do their internal theater level on Friday, CRO on Monday, and then the following week we get together with finance and others to kind of roll up a whole bunch of metrics, and it's submitted at the end of the week to the CFO and the CEO.
That's amazing context. And like a company like yours, you said you're going from 70 million to almost $1 billion. What I have a hard time wrap my mind around is, at that scale, how do you get down to the tactical level of which deals matter, right? Because you're almost boiling the ocean, and you want to give help to whatever needs to happen at the ground level where there's feet on the street. But it's kind of daunting, like, oh, we've gotten to this scale, now we're forecasting a business, but you have to get down to the actual deal level.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I think therein it's a bit of an art as well. I think what happens is you can cut it a few different ways. We have what's called path, right? So you can denote whether a deal is in path or out of path. So that gives you a good sense of how you triangulate using that and the forecast category. So let's say a deal is in commit, the rep's feeling good, it's also in path with the RD or the managers. It seems like it's okay, right? You review the deal notes, you kind of do the prep before the meeting, right? That's key. Then you start to look at outliers, right? Where a rep is committing a deal, but the RD does not have an in path. Okay, Now we have something. Or it could be other way. The RD is saying it's in his path or her path, but the AE is not committing the deal, right? So now what gives you the confidence? What information do you have? And so you start to look at it from that lens. Now, the obvious one is obviously there's a gap between the deal roll up or the team roll up to what the RD or VP, AVP is forecasting, right? Those are also areas that you want to explore. Are you just being bullish because you want to not get yourself called out? So you want to make sure that those areas are being looked into. Deal stages is another one, right? But what you're looking for in each of those is you're being methodical about the sales process. Do you really understand what is the impact of the 3 whys, right? Why do you want to do it now? Why Rubrik, right? What's the pain? Have you identified the real pain and put metrics and really quantified that and made it real for the customer and created those compelling events for them, right? Do you really have the right relationships, right? Because as you all know, it's never about the logic. It's buying is such an emotional, such a non data driven exercise to some extent, right? It's about how you feel as you're coming through that door and interacting with the sellers as well. And what's the feeling and the confidence of the team, right? So are you engaging with the right people in the account and having the right conversations as you're running up, right? So the best deals I've seen happen is when you kind of get it's not a lone wolf, right? The entire pack is coming together and congregating, and it's amazing just to see how that entire symphony is getting put together. So to answer your question, I mean, it takes obviously experience in understanding the space and in knowing what you're looking for and setting those expectations upfront. So what we do is like we have a couple pages that we just outlined, right? Here are the gotchas. Here are the things that you want to be ready with. Because what's not helpful is if the reps just come in blind and start figuring their way, well, they need to do the prep work and the homework. So they're surfacing the right thing. So, these are the table stakes, and then you kind of keep elevating the discussion over time. And that's where you focus the work on actually thinking, not just reporting the news, moving the business forward.
Not just reporting the news. And I think that's a mistake that people at earlier stage companies do when they're doing a pipeline review. They're just like reporting out the numbers, but the story is lost. And I think what struck me about that explanation, Samarth, is your story has qualitative elements to it, right? Like, is there a pain? Are you at the right person? Those things don't show up just in numbers on the surface.
Absolutely. And I think there's also value in what the ecosystem can bring, right? When you think about that, is how are you engaging with the channel partners? In our case, we're all 100% channel driven, and so that matters a great deal. And then you broaden it to other parts, whether it's the big GSIs, the MSPs, what types of discussions are you happening? And you broaden it to even the hyperscalers or the alliances that you form out there in the marketplace to really be effective in driving those conversations and the deal velocity and discounts, etc. So pretty fascinating space, when you get to see not just the 30,000 foot plan, but the deal by deal workings in these forecast calls.
I heard you mention this thing called an accountability forum. I love that term, and I don't even know what it means yet. So what is it, and what goes on during this forum?
Yeah, definitely. The name can be a bit daunting, right? You're coming to it. It's kind of you're going to be examined, and there's a couple of ways to frame that. We do it typically when you're thinking about the annual planning exercise. Each leader, whether it's sales, whether it's marketing, whether it's channel, etc., they're coming up with their headcount or their overall budget asks, right? We want to make it a very thoughtful, data-driven exercise, right? And so they kind of need to come up with their business case in terms of why they think that's the right investment for the business. If we're asking for a certain headcount, or you're opening a new business, let's say in Spain, why do you think that entity is the right entity? Why is it the right timing for it? What analysis have you done or vendor research have you done to determine it's the right market, right? So it's not just throwing darts at the board, but you're being really prescriptive and reflecting. And you should be open to being quizzed And all dialogue is meant to create friction to a certain extent. You're meant to be uncomfortable. So that's one framing of it. The second one is, okay, now the plan is set. Now we need to make sure that we're delivering against the key assumptions in the plan, right? So let me give you an example. Let's just say that we're expecting our ramping reps to deliver a certain productivity, right? Now, being able to measure and break that down in terms of the seasonality for the quarters, then looking at that at the region, at the area levels, at the territory levels, and figuring out where do we see weak spots? Why are we seeing that? And is it an enablement gap? Do the reps not understand how to prosecute, how to run the sales process? What's the personas of those reps? So we can get, quite specific, but, it tends to kind of be in that kind of realm where it's once a month, it's at a CRO and his or her directs level that we do. And it's basically kind of going through each of the different leaders, and they have specific set of input metrics that have been agreed upon in the build out of the plan, right? Another example is attrition, right? We want to be mindful of that's a key lever in our plan, and making sure we're keeping that within healthy bounds, and ensuring that reps that are coming in, they're obviously putting their sweat and equity in the company and the vision and the mission. And so we also want to make sure that they're being given the right coaching and opportunity to grow their careers. And so it's a double edge, right? And so we want to make sure that we're keeping attrition as well in the bounds. So we look at that across different sets of the business. And so tension between the sales team, the HR teams, like how are we orchestrating and manifesting that in whether it's the emotional or the intellectual aspects of the job and so forth.
Hey, thanks for listening. We'll be right back after a word from our sponsors. Annual planning season is upon us. That's right, my favorite time of year. And it's not just about setting goals for the coming year. It's about ensuring you have the right tools in place to measure and achieve those goals. As a SaaS CFO, I know having access to reliable, real-time metrics is crucial for my annual planning process. That's why I'm so excited to partner with today's sponsor, Maxio. Maxio is a billing and financial operations platform that helps subscription businesses reconcile bookings, billings, GAAP revenue, and SaaS metrics automatically. By the way, guys, bookings, billings, GAAP revenue, not the same thing. Got to get them straight. Because these numbers are the foundation of your financial models, it's important to have quick access and trust that they are correct. Don't let the complexities of SaaS finance and accounting slow you down. If you want to start 2025 with the right tools, check out Maxio by visiting maxio.com/run the numbers. That's maxio.com/run the numbers. Request a demo through our link to support the podcast, ya boy, and receive a 10% discount on your first year with Maxio. That's maxio.com/run the numbers. maxio.com/run the numbers. Please, guys, I really need this. Ready to take your company global? Mr. Worldwide! You'll expand your business into new countries, hire international team members, run multi-currency payroll, pay local benefits, and stay on the straight and narrow with tax compliance. Sounds like easy stuff, right? As businesses grow beyond their borders, they face a maze of regulations and logistical challenges. RemoFirst clears the path as your trusted global employer of record, enabling you to hire in over 180 countries without setting up local entities. They manage international payroll, tax compliance, and HR benefits while ensuring adherence to local employment laws in every country. Whether you're looking to make your first international hire or streamline existing global operations, RemoFirst makes global employment simple with their employer of record (EOR) service starting at $199 a month, an average of 50% less than other providers. I've seen companies grow their operations in 20 countries with RemoFirst help. You can get 2 months free on EOR fees for your first hire in any country by visiting remofirst.com/metrics. That's REMOFIRST.com/metrics. Discover how easy international hiring can be at remofirst.com/metrics. Just go to remofirst.com/metrics. As a CFO, I can say firsthand that the most important thing to know is how money enters and leaves the building, full stop. Without a simple and easy to monitor financial system, you're flying blind. And I'm the kind of guy who likes to have all my tools in one place. I'm talking checking accounts, bill pay, credit cards, and everything else I need to run a business. I'm pumped that Mercury is both a sponsor of this podcast and a safe place to keep my cash. It sure beats keeping my cash under my mattress again. Plus, it looks slick. I always get angry when back office tools are ugly. Newsflash. Finance people may wear both a belt and suspenders to work, but we like stuff that looks good too. Sorry, I just had to get that off my chest. Mercury simplifies your financial operations with powerful banking, giving you greater control, precision, and speed so you can operate at your best. Make the switch today, like I did. Tell them your boy CJ from Run the Numbers sent you. Mercury is a financial technology company, not a bank. Banking services provided by Choice Financial Group and Evolve Banking Trust. Members FDIC. If I was to pick two words that you used, tension and friction, are those two things inherent to what your function is tasked with creating, and is it healthy?
And now that you say it that way, it makes me feel like, oh my God. Well, I think it's there's a lot of fun behind it. I think it's definitely, it's not easy, right?
No, and I know where it comes from the FP&A perspective too. Like with budgets, it's resource allocation at its core. If you do this, then you don't have enough to do that, and therefore, in order to get the best answer out of somebody, you gotta weigh it against something else that's an alternative.
Yeah, and I think when it's done in the right spirit and with the right understanding, that you've actually scaled a business, you know what it takes. You're not questioning the need itself, but you're questioning more to understand the why and bring healthy dialogue to it. I think that just refines your thinking. Sometimes it might just be, are you being a bit too hasty in your decisioning? Is it the right timing? Well, are we not seeing that there's potentially another part of the business that's also thinking of a similar type of role or allocation of budget? So you may not also be connecting end to end. So sometimes, you'll have different people in the room helping you connect the dots a bit better.
Yeah.
And so it's a very evolutionary exercise, right? It's not as black and white. There's a lot of, meeting in the middle that happens through that discussion and alignment.
I couldn't agree more. And I think friction actually illuminates to a certain extent, because it puts groups into a position where you either identify overlaps or gaps. And then once you have that healthy tension, you can figure, okay, so what's the solution if we both see it that way?
Absolutely. You nailed it.
What are the best practices for inspecting pipeline? And maybe you could take this from, you touched on it a bit earlier, but like the types of questions that you ask. Do you have like any questions that your team says like, hey, Samarth is famous for asking that?
Yeah. So, pipeline PG, our CRO, Brian McCarthy, says that if there's one word that needs to be on his tombstone, it's PG, right? So that's how near and dear it is. Yeah. And I think we take that very seriously here, and making sure that the pipeline model is very thoughtful. It considers the impact that not just the sales reps, but the ecosystem can bring to bear. So we look at channel, we look at SDR, we look at marketing, and make sure that we're modeling this out considering historical data, what has been the conversion. We look at how far out typically the pipeline needs to be created in order for it to convert in any given quarter. So it could be four quarters, it could be 6 quarters. So we kind of bake that in. We also account for pipeline slippage that happens, right? As you run up to that quarter, the melt that happens prior. And then as the quarter starts, it's not just the pipe that you enter with, there's also a fair amount of pipe that gets created in the quarter and closes in the quarter, and also pipe that can get pulled into the quarter, right? Each of these variables have different conversion mixes and parameters around it. So all of that to say it sits in a giant model that we build, and we then further break that pipeline down into the different legs of the stool, as I mentioned, whether it's sales, channel, SDR, and marketing for us kind of runs all the way through, right? So we make sure that marketing has a role wherein they can influence channel pipeline generation, sales, and SDR, and they're running different kind of plays. So once these targets are built and rolled out, the setup we have is we've got what we call a metrics for success dashboard, maybe a familiar term to a lot of people. It captures your activity at a unit level. So it'll start from inquiries or MQLs to meetings to opportunities and bookings, all the way through. It gives you a 360 view of the rep to say, how many meetings have you had in the trailing 13 weeks? How many opportunities did you generate? What was the week over week? What was the stage mix of the current pipeline that you have running in the current quarter and next quarter? So all of this analytical information is sitting in a very, very well built out dashboard. And as you're running through these calls to explain the why behind the targets, right? Because if the reps don't understand why you've put a certain number, there's no value in it, right? So what we do is we'll work backwards from if you've got a certain, let's say your quota is 600K, just throw out a number, right? How many new business meetings do you need? Let's say you need 4 new business meetings. There's a 30% conversion from new business meetings to opportunities. Okay. So that's about 1.3 ops per week. Average deal size, let's say it's about 105K. That brings you to, you need to generate about 135K of PG per week. Now you take that 135 weeks into 26 weeks in the half, right? Ours is a biannual plan. So that's about 3.5 million of pipe. That's the amount of pipe that you would need to have available, assuming there's a 20% conversion rate to get to your 600,000 of bookings, or let's say that's your quota, to hit your 100% attainment for the half, right? So it's very easy to start to see how the inputs will ultimately allow you to deliver and reach your attainment. So we've got that kind of thinking and modeling running across every segment, every geography, down to a rep level. So that's where the scientific part of it really allows the reps and the RDs to have the tooling in place. And then what we do is we'll run these cadences on a weekly basis, just similar to the forecast, right? The sales leaders are running this with their teams and so on down the chain. And at a unit level, what's happening is the AEs are connecting with the ecosystem leaders on a weekly basis, right? Let's look at the accounts. Which ones do we prioritize? What plays do we need to run? Okay, marketing. These are the things that we're launching this week, whether it's certain campaigns, certain events happening. How are we going to divide and conquer? This is where SDRs, I need you to help me prospect into this account. These are the so it's very much like at a unit level that work needs to happen. And what's fascinating is seeing that journey from being at when you're at 70 million and how it was being done to where it's still being done at $1 billion. That work doesn't change at the unit level, but it needs to be done even more intentionally at that unit level because every unit will matter.
That was like watching Klay Thompson hit 11 threes in one quarter. Sometimes you just gotta give the man the ball and let him cook. I can't applaud you enough because the rep math, you just made it so real. And I've made the mistake before where it's like, okay, let's give this enterprise rep a target of 2 million. It's like, okay, well, what's the average deal size? It's 150. And just use round numbers. I can't do public math as well as you did. But then you get down, you're like, oh, so this would actually require them to close 1 deal every business day. That's physically impossible. The reality of the situation just doesn't align to what you had in an Excel workbook. And it's even more amazing that you can do that at such a scale.
Yeah. And that's what builds trust and credibility, right? So we have a very thoughtful rollout process with the sales leaders. So we believe in that this is the right plan. This is why it sets them up for success. So when we're looking at the metrics, it's real, right? Every number on that matters. And it's no surprise when you do percentile math and the reps that are the top performers, it's very clear the inputs that I just spoke about, the meetings and the bookings. It's a very clear an alignment there, very clear correlation. So
we had spoken to Ryan Walsh, the CEO and founder of RepView, which does data on sales rep achievement and basically what goes on with taking a role at a particular company, how much they like it. And he had said that when you hand a rep a commission letter, it has to feel it can feel optimistic, but it has to feel realistic to them. And if they can't see the math of how to make it work, that's when you've lost the room.
Absolutely. And I think it goes back to also how you not just set the quota, but also provide the reps the right tools. So they have visibility into what business they're closing and how does that impact their paycheck on not at every single deal level. Because what's worse is if they are, let's say, 5% away from hitting the next tier, they could have had a much different commission paycheck. And having that information at your fingertips is crucial.
So that goes into the transparency piece, I'm guessing, right? That goes into analytics. Like, it's not just analytics for the sake of forecasting. It's analytics to get people's trust and buy-in and be able to say, like, I sold this deal. This is how much it equates for me, the rep.
Absolutely. And I think that trust and buy-in drives motivation, right? Now they're not focused internally on, is this the right number? How did you get to it, etc. The focus is more outward, because what our job in sales ops, revenue ops is to make sure that we put our sellers' minds at ease, that we've got their backs. That way they can go out and deliver the best knockout punch we need them to. Because what's more thrilling is when you see that win wire and that rep that you built the quota and you built the pipeline model for goes out there and crushes it, and you see their happy faces, or you meet them at club or something, right? There's nothing more gratifying than that. So we try to really take that to heart in how we operate. And several of the team members that have the great fortune that they've been around for a long time now, some of them even nearing 7 years, they've built those close relationships and trust with the reps as well. And there's no favoritism, right? Like, it's a very open and transparent process that we run here, and that goes a long way.
I worked at Veeam Software backup and recovery. It was actually a competitor in some ways to Rubrik. This was way back in the day, but my brother was actually a sales rep, and then I was in FP&A. And then my buddy Mike Brez, who's probably listening right now, he was running sales ops. So he was responsible for the quota deployment and stuff, and also some of the dashboards. And I remember my brother used to take pictures of his Salesforce instance, and it would have just like a pie chart, and it would be fully filled in. Like, it wouldn't have like any analytics. It would be a chart that was like one of one. And he'd always send it in a group chat to me and Brez, like, you boys working hard today? Thank you so much for making my job as a rep easier.
Absolutely. And I think you need to be also careful, right? How much content you're putting out there. Because I've seen companies where they've gotten to $1 billion with barely any basic data or analytics, right? They don't even calculate what is the rep attainment, right?
Yeah.
And we were somewhere there, I think, in the early days, but we've come a long way. And I think we're very mindful of how much tooling do we put out there, right? Because we need to make sure that if we're not streamlining that and making the lives of the reps easier, we're doing them a disservice. Even though we think we're busy and potentially adding value, it's actually drowning them. So we really keep our ears to the ground in gathering the feedback. So recently, we rolled out some surveys to the SDR team, and we asked them, like, hey, what's working? What's not working?
Yeah.
And it doesn't just end there, but the team did a phenomenal job with taking that to heart. And now we're running through different kind of changes that we're making and how we're thinking through reshaping parts of the business and relaying that feedback back to the field. Now they feel like, okay, they feel empowered that now they're being put in a position of success. So keeping that closed loop and keeping that open dialogue through different channels is really important in building that trust, right? It's not a one and done. It's an ongoing effort to continue to be the best you can be, right? Sky's the limit, right? No one's really figured out which way is up in the revenue game, right? But the core tenets are, you're coming here, you're delivering the absolute best that you can. You're being critical of your own work, and in doing so, you're helping your frontline sellers and them eventually helping the customers, right? Because what we do is really special in that, helping companies protect their data, which is their last line of defense, is really core to what we do, and that mission permeates. So, when you think about healthcare companies, retail companies, small mom and pop shops, government agencies, when they get hit with a ransomware and their data is compromised, Rubrik has their back. And so that's what we take very seriously. And that mission really, gives us that fire. This is really something that, hits home, especially when you hear about incidents day in, day out that are happening, and how, they can bring down, whole companies and livelihoods along with that.
I'm pretty sure right before this podcast started, my wife, who just got a new computer, accidentally deleted everything on my Dropbox. So, I'm feeling the pain right now.
Oh, I've been there. Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So like, I'm going to be dumpster diving for files right after we get off. But in the meantime, I wanted to talk about territory design, because you were speaking to like where the rubber hits the road, having trust and accountability, but also being able to map it back to an Excel model, that all kind of culminates in like, what is the rep's territory? But it feels like it's kind of both art and science. Is that right?
Absolutely. And I think one needs to be careful in how much of science you bring, right? So for instance, in building out the science side of it, we'll look at bringing together understand our ICP, look at the technographic, firmographic information, gather all the great hierarchy and put it together in a nice little spreadsheet or tool. But I think the game just begins there, right? I think the key part is what's the core principle is you want to make sure you put the right rep in the right territory. This is they're the right persona that can sell effectively to those end customers and bring value to them, right? And so, you want to make sure that you're having dialogue with the reps and matching what their selling capabilities are, what types of accounts have they sold into, what types of industries have they sold into, what relationships have they built in those accounts that makes them most effective in driving those conversations forward. Because the territory design is important, yes, absolutely, and we take it to heart in terms of the number of accounts and being prescriptive in terms of what bands we want to operate in, what's the mix of customers versus prospects, and how we think of that for each of the segments, whether it's majors or mid-market or core enterprise. And there's different benchmarks that we've set based on backtesting the data with historical performance to say this is what great looks like. And we're able to share that information with the reps, so it gives them confidence that this is what the legwork that's been done to set up my territory plan and make sure it's equitable, right? But it doesn't just end there. It's making sure there's the right match and the fit, and that starts with when you roll out the rec, you're being mindful of how you've set up the territory, and therefore who are you hiring, right? So that's kind of how we think about bringing together the art and the science.
If I was to play it back, it sounds like a major mistake people make is to over rely on the math and not think about the relationships that may pre-exist in those accounts, which allow you to get to the revenue faster.
You nailed it.
How do you deal with reps horse trading accounts over time?
Yeah, I mean, I think that you need to have clear criteria that you prevent that from happening, right? One of the best ways to do that is by having transparent processes that you use to build out your territory and your accounts, right? So, whether it's revenue potential, or if it's a certain annual revenue band, or you're looking at the customer fit or vertical expertise, or you're looking at balancing the workload. Like, there's a variety of things that you want to lay out there in terms of defining why their account base is the way it is today. But if there are issues that the rep has, we have a clear appeals process that we go through, right? And making sure that they have the opportunity, whether it could be a hierarchy issue, or it could be that they're better equipped in a certain region given the buying center. And there's various mechanisms to deal through that, right? Whether you agree on certain split, because while the EB or the champion may be in a certain geo, there's also a fair amount of influence that's happening in a different team that could be sitting under a different site level account. So there's all those kind of things that play into it. So while there could be valid corner cases,
yeah,
and we want to be mindful of that, there is a clear objective criteria in when and why we might move an account to the reps. Now, there's obvious situations wherein a rep leaves the territory, right? And so you want to make sure you're not leaving any opportunity unturned, right?
Oh, say more there, because I don't think that gets talked about enough.
Yeah, so I think, what's worse is that you have a live opportunity and that's close to the finish line or even in mid stage, and you leave the customer high and dry, right? In those scenarios, you want to make sure that you're either handing that account or that opportunity over to another rep in the team who's well suited, or the sales leader is stepping in to handle those deals, right? And there's specific comp considerations and that come with that, right? But we make sure that at least there's live opportunities get addressed
Samarth, we were talking to Brett Queener, who is the first sales operations and strategy guy at Salesforce, and he's talking about working for Mark Benioff and how just the simple thinking is as you add more products over time, as Salesforce did, the territories get smaller. Is that what happens in reality?
Yes, and I don't think that's a bad thing, right? That's just an evolution of your business, right? As you're going to, and Rubrik's are very much a platform company. We're going to continue to add product, and so as we do that, we expect that the territories will get smaller. Why? Because we want to make sure that we're able to provide the sellers with enough time so that they can go in and penetrate and leverage the products that they have to its fullest extent, right? What's worse is that we have untapped accounts and untapped opportunity that's sitting out there that is not getting acted upon, right? So, I mean, the flip side of this is because if you have very large territories and there's lack of focus, the reps are also not hitting their number, right? So in any scenario, what you want to do is you want to make sure there's clear priority accounts that are identified, right? Even if you have, let's say, to start with 50 accounts or 200 accounts, you want to still identify what are the priority. But it's only natural that as you get more maturity, you want to get deeper in penetrating your accounts. You're considering also the capacity and workload that it takes to penetrate these accounts. Because some of them, you could argue when you get into the Fortune 500, Fortune Global 2000s, right? These are massive accounts, right? There are multiple buying entities that's sitting under them. There's multiple personas and people, and our product, cuts across many different persona types as well. So it's a very intense and complex space. So you want to make sure that you're seeing the right level of engagement and activity happening with the sales reps and those accounts in order to justify the density that you have, right? And oftentimes sales reps will come to us and say, well, I don't have enough accounts. I don't see that as a way. Like, look at these 5 accounts. They're not going to buy anything. And so obviously we want to be mindful and respect and understand that feedback. But then that's when we have a data-driven approach to determining what we've seen in historically in that market, where we still see untapped opportunities. So what we've done is we've built what is called a product penetration dashboard that allows us to see of our customer base, how many of them have bought all of our products or some of our products. And so we're able to very surgically go in and show them where's their untapped potential, right? And so have they taken the effort to go in, understand what it takes to sell those new products into those accounts? Have they had the conversations? If they need help, here's the help. We have experienced solution engineers or specialists in the marketplace that can help them drive the deals in those accounts. But it starts to become a very interesting and evolving discussion when you start to look at engagement and you start to look at where you've actually penetrated to bring it to real life to say there's tons more opportunity out there.
Yeah. And over time, like it can get to the point where your company is so big and doing business that is so meaningful with other big companies that it's a rep with an entire team just focused on one company. Like my buddy Mitch, he's at VMware, now Broadcom, and he only covers Wells Fargo. He wakes up every day and thinks about what does Wells Fargo need to be successful. And he has a massive team of people under him. And so like when you're at a smaller sales org, it's hard to imagine that it can get to that point, but it really does.
Yeah. And, sometimes if companies are at a different inflection point where, let's say, scaling headcount is not an option, right? You might need to create territories larger and provide more support in terms of training and tools to help the sellers expand the product portfolio. So that might be a point where you need to invest. Maybe the scaling or the product rollout wasn't as thought through, right? Maybe we put in too much too soon. And so I think that's where it's a delicate balance between how do you create that level of focus across your product portfolio while also enabling the reps, while also revitalizing the ecosystem and driving the focus in those other verticals, while also having marketing focus in driving the right campaigns and events and behaviors in those accounts, while also having a comp plan that can get the reps excited about selling this new product out there. So the engineering behind that entire end-to-end go-to-market motion that I just kind of laid out is also very important, right? And so, but it's where the fun is, honestly. Like, as you kind of go through a product rollout and scaling it, and then you have another product and you know what's worked. So you kind of, now the game is upped. Now you need to figure out, okay, I know the metrics, I know what I need to hit, I know what sales plays. Now what's next? How can I even do better, right? So it starts to become a very fun and engaging experience with the teams.
Hey, you'd mentioned comp plans. At a high level, what are the characteristics of a good comp plan?
I mean, I think number one is no secret. You want to keep it simple, right? It should be aligned to the company goals, right? So for us, new and expansion revenue, key for us, right? Keep getting those new logos, and we've been fortunate. There's a lot of demand, and we're really actively pursuing it. But I think it comes down to not having too many elements in the comp plan, right? You start to think about, oh, I'm going to have a new logo uplift, and I'm going to have a kicker in the comp plan for a 3-year deal or beyond, and I'm going to I'm going to add a component in there for rep participation, and I'm going to put something else for renewals in there and something else for expansion. So I think you just want to balance how you build that out. And then you also want to make it attractive enough, right? Whether it's in terms of the tier structure that you put out there, whether it's in terms of the quotas that you're rolling out, you want to make sure that gives the reps the psychological feeling that, this really sets them up for success. You have the people surrounding that can really help them. And obviously, as the company scales, we want to be mindful in designing those comp plans, thinking about, how do you scale the business along with that, right? Because when you're in an early stage in a growth mode, there's different tactics and different levers and incentive mechanisms, right? It might be you have some more equity, you have a lower commission rate, but as you get more mature, perhaps you decide you want to up the commission rate, right? Like, so there's different factors that might sort of play into depending on where you are in the evolution journey. And we obviously do some of the benchmarking and try to understand what is the deal velocity, what's the complexity and the sales cycle that a rep might be going through. And so making sure there's the reward at the end of it, in terms of the commission rates, the accelerators that they get into are also rewarding the kind of investment that the reps are putting in, right? So it's a fascinating space, and it's never dearth of ideas and challenge that you get from the field, because it all comes down to, are the reps participating, are they attaining, and that's what's going to keep the company and the business growing.
Well, speaking of challenges, let's take a scenario. I'm a rep. I come to you. I say, hey, Samarth, my quota is too high. How do you approach that conversation?
A couple of things that come to mind, right? I think no rep will ever tell you when they get their comp plan that, hey, this was a layup. Never in the history have I ever seen that, right? They'll always find enough examples, and the most creative ones, simpler ones are like, oh, look at my historical quota, look at my year-on-year growth, look at this other teams, and they start talking, right? But I think what you want to do in advance of any of those rollouts is hand them the keys. Say, you're in a hyper-growth company, right? What does great look like? You're expecting a certain growth threshold. That's why you're here, right? Okay. Now let's be big boys and girls. Let's start to design how you want to set up your business so that it's going at that clip. What are the things that you need to do in order to accomplish it, right? So now they're having to come up with an answer that otherwise they might be the recipient of, and they may not be open to it, right? So now you're starting to get them coming to the pond with you.
Wow.
Now, there's obviously things that we do in terms of the market potential, and we have a very good sizing model that we've built over the years and honed that shows you what's the addressable market, where does that sit, what's your ICP, and so you can review the reps pipeline and compare it to the market potential and start to show you how the target is achievable and what expected conversion rates and so forth can play through, incorporating elements like deal size, segment, etc. You can also look at, historical attainment and show how over time with those quota changes, the reps have attained or not attained and where those soft spots are and how you're accounting for that. And do the comparison with peers in other segments and so forth. So you start to really give the reps a sense or the leaders a sense for where there's opportunity for growth, right? And, start to look at even competitors in the marketplace and see what, comparable quotas are in that business and talk about how your product or your company and the portfolio that you have is more high caliber. So I think there's a no clear answer. I think you just kind of meet the sales leaders in terms of the journey they're on. But what's important is that the framing and the expectation setting that happens early on, especially the sales leaders in the planning cycle, is going to be the one that sets you up when you actually roll out the comp plan and the quotas, right? Because the conversations then become more on the edges as opposed to questioning the fundamental buildup of the plan and the quotas itself.
That's amazing. Maybe gearing towards the close, I just want to do a couple of questions on renewals. So as
Absolutely.
a company gets bigger, you're getting to that $1 billion in ARR mark. Renewals become increasingly important, and I would guess also more complex. So what does a healthy renewals function look like?
Yeah, I mean, great question. And 3 years ago, I had the opportunity to help build out the renewals business in outlining the systems, the process, the metric structure, the team setup, all of those things. And it's been a fascinating journey, just kind of getting closer and closer to that business and its growth. I think what's important is I'll lay out 3 or 4 different things. One is you want to make sure you're thinking customer first, right? You're building your product that you're building, you're selling, you're keeping the customer delight at the topmost. That's your North Star. So whether you're a renewal rep or customer success or an AE, and you're coming together as a pod, you don't compromise anything for that eventual outcome for the end customer, right? That's just the guiding principle. Number 2 is you're making sure you're being very methodical in how you're going about the customer journey, right? From the pre-sale to the sale to the post-sale experience, from deployment, adoption, and the renewal cycle. It's a very thoughtful, and it's different by segment, right? So what we've done is kind of align certain talent on renewal reps and AEs based on the segment and the needs of those segments, right? So some segments, for instance, this goes back to your question, right? How do you want to scale it? Some segments are obviously more high touch, right? More relationship, more white glove handling issues. But what we do is, the third thing is we bring together a very strong data and analytics piece around it to help understand what is the health of the account, right? In terms of how is the adoption experience? How is the usage? What's the frequency? How much usage have we seen? What's the issues that have come up over time? And so kind of keeping a very tight control on those things. And oftentimes you might also get surprised by, even despite all of that and intervening, you might still have sometimes a churn come through, right? But really being close to the account and the key contacts is core to that. And then, number 4 is, right, it's everyone's job. Renewal is not just the AEs or the renewal reps, right? It comes together in every function playing a key role in helping, whether it's deal desk or product ops in helping set up and give a great experience to the customer. Because as no company is going to have obviously 100% GRR, right? I'd be shocked with that, right? Unless you're maybe like 2 or 3 customers. But as you continue to grow, there's going to be some healthy degree of downsell that happens in the account potentially, or churn. But you want to make sure that you build strong advocates and relationships that actually sell on your behalf, and they come to you when they have a need. And that's what really adds the multiples on your top line in the form of NRR, or net revenue retention. So that's the kind of long game for us in making sure that, we're blessed in that our customers stick with us. They find incredible value. So we've had a NRR of north of 120%. And so we've been really fortunate in doing that. And obviously core to this is, you're continuing to build the relationships, right? The segmentation and the personalization. You don't want to lose those as you scale the business. And so really that's the delicate balance that we're trying to strike.
Wow. That was amazing. Well, Samarth, I want to congratulate you on all your success, both personally and at Rubrik. It's been fun to watch the company grow. And I can't thank you enough for being so generous with your time.
Thank you so much, CJ. The pleasure is all mine, and keep those posts coming in. We love the energy. We love the community you're building, and cheering for you from the sidelines.
Thank you, sir. Run the Numbers is a mostly LLC production. Yelling an intro by Fat Joe. Artwork by some AI thingamajig. Podcast and video editing is done by Cleancast at cleancast.io. Nothing said on this podcast is intended to be business or investment advice. It's the sole opinion of me, a guy who feeds his dog too much ice cream and has a history of net operating losses, LOL. If you like this podcast, please hit subscribe. It would mean a lot to me. And also check out mostlymetrics.com. That's my newsletter where I explore business models and financial metrics. Thanks for riding with me. Share this with your friends. Peace.